Geek Vibes Live is rated G for geek.
It's time!
Hey, this is Matt Lesher.
This is Phil Lamar.
Hey, this is Ryan Taylor, a.k.a. the Penguin from Gotham, and you are listening to Geek Vibes Live.
And here we go.
Okay, that always takes a second to start recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Geek Vibes Live Review. For today's review, I'm your host, Tia, and I have with me Chris Patton. Is it Patton or Peyton? I don't think I ever asked.
Oh my goodness, it's Patton, like General Patton.
That's cool, right?
Well, I always like to make sure. I hate mispronouncing people's names. It's like a huge pet peeve of mine. So if I can, I always at least try.
No, it's okay. I totally understand. No, that's the normal that I get is Peyton or Patton? Are you painting? Are you patenting things?
Well, Chris, I am excited to have you here with me. And I also have with me Paulie, who is my boyfriend. And you did a podcast with me, I feel like
a year ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. So hello, Paulie.
Hello, everybody.
We sound super excited right now, even though the subject matter of our review is about a supposed serial killer. So
Kind of dark.
Yeah. Chris actually came to me and was like, hey, Tia, I know you really like true crime stuff, and I think you should watch The Confession Killer on Netflix. And I did. And Chris, it was honestly really, really crazy. So I just want to thank you, first of all, for suggesting it. Also, just want you to kind of walk me through what you even originally thought when you first watched this miniseries.
So right off the bat, because of the day we live in, the time we live in, and watching so many of these killers confess and seeing some of the confession videos they start episode 1 with, it's just, this guy didn't commit all these murders, which he is a serial killer. He killed, 4 or 5 people legitimately, but he just starts telling stories, and then you hear these Texas Rangers feeding him information. And the more and more you watch of this documentary, the creepier it gets, because they're just trying to get murders off their book, which makes it so sketchy. And I was like, I have to tell Tia about this, because we talked about true crime.
You're also mean there's other killers out there that are just roaming free.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that not that, oh God, this sounds bad because I'm definitely not some serial killer aficionado, but I feel like you obviously know about, say, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Son of Sam, the big guys. And the way that Henry Lee Lucas was claiming that he's killed so many people, I'm like, I feel like I would have heard about this guy at some point.
Definitely.
So when they started and he was, opened up with all these horrific crimes and everything, it was just kind of like, how have I never heard of Henry Lee Lucas? But Paul, I wanted to ask you, so first of all, okay, as Chris said, the Texas Rangers bring this guy in because there's the murder of this old woman and this young woman, whatever, and he gets brought in, he gets put before a judge, and he says to the judge, well, what about the other 100 women that I've killed? And so, when you heard that, what did you originally think?
Well, originally I thought he actually did it, but, I thought maybe he was exaggerating the number a little, and he didn't really have an idea of how many exactly. But then as the show went on and I realized that he didn't actually kill all these people, I started to wonder then why did he even say that to begin with? You know, like, and then we see later on that they did mention that he had brain damage from an incident when he was a child that would cause him to have a lack of impulse control. So I thought maybe that was the case and he just blurted this out in court because he couldn't control himself.
Yeah, it was really crazy to me because they bring him in and he says, you know, what about the other 100 women that I've killed? And I have to tell you that I thought the look on the judge was hilarious.
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't have, but he was just so shocked. And honestly, so if someone said that, Henry Lee Lucas was certainly his own worst enemy. But what surprised me, and I kind of want to like just not take it episode by episode, but just focus on the first episode for a second, because that was the one where they talk about how then Henry gets brought in by this one ranger, and suddenly it's like a hub for all these other rangers to come and interrogate him. And so then that famous journalist, Hugh Ainsworth, who actually had been responsible for also interviewing Ted Bundy, comes in. He brings in a Japanese film crew, and they're interviewing him. And it just seemed at first, Chris, that they were all being like really nice to him. I mean, they gave him a present and everything. What did you think about that?
It's insane to think about when you're talking about people's family and their loved ones and everything that they may have went through. And obviously they want the guy to talk because he said he killed 100 people. But and the thing is the first murder that he's convinced of, he brings them right to the site.
Yeah, that's the strange thing. So he definitely committed those.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's a question, though, because then later, you know, remember he says that, well, I didn't drive the car, they did,
yeah,
you
the
know?
whole thing was sketchy. Like, for all we know, the police could have committed. I mean, who knows? Like,
yeah, you don't certainly know, but
But they didn't necessarily have the crime scene as mapped out as well as some of the other ones from other police departments. So when he's talking about his hometown of Texas and the unfortunate, the two females that he killed first off, which I think one was Betty, which was his girlfriend, longtime girlfriend, which was very strange. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but they had said that Betty was like 15 years old and he himself was like in his 40s, and I'm like, are we just going to gloss over that fact?
Like, was he actually his girlfriend?
Like, was it consensual?
So that in itself gets really weird as well, because later on we'll get into some even crazier stuff about Betty as I don't want to say a character, but as someone that's very involved with these cases, right? But obviously someone in her family found out, an older person found out, who also ended up murdered. And this is a guy that was convicted of murder for his mother. He killed his own mother. So we'll set the tone of this, because I feel like I don't want people to walk away from this and just be like, this guy had concussion syndrome and was not a bad person.
Oh, he was. You have to have something. I mean, even with the syndrome, there has to be some type of like. I heard someone else quote it this way the other day. I think it was from the actual documentary, but I think one of the detectives in it said that there was like no firewall there. Like there's something missing. Like, for you to actually go through with killing someone, there's got to be some type of evilness there.
Well, and my main thing about like Henry Lee Lucas was, and I don't want to get like too ahead of it either, and you're right, Chris, like I don't want anyone to like walk away and say this guy was just completely absolved of doing anything wrong. I mean, I think it was like a combination of who he was and also the overzealousness of, you know, the police department, or specifically the Rangers, really. But what did Paulie, what did you think of like actual Henry Lee Lucas? Because the guy was a character.
Like, if to be totally honest, if I saw him walking down the street, I probably wouldn't stop to talk to him, but I wouldn't. At the same time, I don't think the thought would cross my mind that this guy has just killed multiple people. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of him. He's like really a mystery to me because it's perplexing as to why he would, if he knew like the detectives were just feeding him information and driving him to scenes, like why go along with it? Like, so I couldn't think of anything logical.
Well, in a way, it kind of reminded me of, like, remember Making a Murderer, where the nephew of the guy, I forget his name now, but he was confessing to all these things, pretty much kind of being fed to it. So it I guess you could say that.
Was it Brendan Avery?
The nephew.
Brendan.
Yeah. Like, remember, he, clearly didn't do it, but he was so, like, coerced, and not to sound bad or anything, but he wasn't very intelligent. He had a very low IQ, and I think that's the same thing that they kind of said of Henry Lee Lucas, that he didn't have a very high IQ at all, really. I don't think that, and this sounds bad, but I don't think he was very smart. But I don't know, he was very strange. I didn't like how they were treating him at first, where they were being so kind and giving him gifts and everything.
But then, but then you have, like, where he himself, the detective, said that after each interview, he would tell the detective that he didn't do all those things.
No, I know.
So it makes it perplexing. It's like, well, then why? So is he smart, or is he... Sometimes I, like, look at him and I'm wondering, like, maybe he's smarter than we all think. Like,
well, I'll tell you what, he was definitely smarter than that guy, Otis.
Yeah.
Chris, what did you think about that guy, Otis? Before you answer, that is also a very strange situation, because if Henry didn't commit all the murders that he's saying, like, what then did he and Otis do with each other? Because Otis was saying that what they did was go cross-country and murder all these women. So it's like, is that itself a whole entire fabrication?
Well, Otis itself is maybe a different side podcast, because it's one of the most famous murders in history, because he killed the son, like, legitimately, and found out in evidence-wise, killed the son of the guy that hosts America's Most Wanted, whose name escapes me at the moment.
That's him?
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I always knew that the host of America's Most Wanted had started his journey because of a tragedy with his son, but I didn't know that was the actual guy.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I don't want to say that's what he's famous for, but what he is famous for is he, in theory, confessed to the death of John Walsh's kid, and it turns out it is likable. It is most likely that he was the person that did that, evidence-wise, and where you were. And at the same time, the confession killer that we're talking about would have been migrating between Florida and Texas. So there is a connection between these two people. Now, the connection that they're saying is between them, where they killed thousands of people, is very different than probably what it actually is, and that's what makes the story, I don't want to say interesting, because that's very macabre, but it's weird.
You have to kill multiple people a night.
Listen, I think this is the kind of just society that we live in, is that it is interesting. I don't think channels like the ID channel or anything like that would be as popular as it is if we as humans didn't have some sort of curiosity when it came to horrific stuff like this. But
it's not normal.
Because it's not something that any of us
so you can't wrap your head around
would really even think of doing. So it's like, to kind of see someone else and see a story unfold is just like, whoa. But I would say the most fascinating part about this entire story, which we're going to dig more deeply into, is the governmental cover-up of DNA evidence, and the fact that this guy did not commit
all the murders that they got off the books, which is so insensitive to the families and also insensitive to the public in general.
Yeah.
I think the beginning of that, when we all, at least for me, when we all kind of raised our eyebrows, was when Henry was speaking with the Japanese film crew, and he kind of really brags and says, "Oh, I killed a few people in your country as well," and they were saying, it's a small country, you probably would have been found out.
Yeah.
And the journalist asked him, well, how the hell did you get there? And he goes, I drove, of course. And it's like, was he just being cheeky, or did he really think, like, I don't know about that.
Or did he mean he drove to the airport and he just didn't finish his sentence?
I don't think that guy has ever left the country. I don't think that guy's ever left the country. So that began, like, the obvious eyebrow raise. And when he said that, the Texas Ranger was in the room with him, and it didn't seem like the Texas Ranger was even remotely, like, bothered or decided to be curious about that, but
he wanted it.
He wanted it to
that
be
big
that
score.
Well, he, was the sheriff that had, risen to glory from that, sniper story with the helicopter and everything.
Yeah.
But before we move into, like, the real meat of this whole entire documentary series, I did want to ask Chris, what did you think about the sister Clemmy? Because I just, like, and I don't want to be mean because I feel like she does come from, like, a sincere place, but I was just like,
a little strange.
How naive can you actually be?
Like, she got very close.
It's very hard to say because I don't know what that person's been through, but it is knowing the victims and knowing who this killer might be should give you a little bit of an idea of who these people might be in their surroundings, right? But also they edit and cut things in a way that you don't expect a lot of times, right? So I would like to hear that full interview more than anything else before I make a judgment.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Definitely. I didn't even think of that, actually, that they do edit things to make it more dramatic.
And I was going to say, like, it's far be it from me to ever judge someone on, like, their faith or their ability to forgive. But I think just that one of the women had pointed out that Clemmy was giving this guy Henry haircuts with really big scissors and not realizing why that may be a problem. But we can get completely...
I mean, as it kind of turns around, like, there's no reason why she would be worried about him. This is a person that obviously, through the rest of the story, has a mental problem related to women that really love him, from what I gathered. And she felt no threat because of the power of God. And I mean, if you believe in your faith, and if she thought, like, if this guy's going to kill me, he's going to kill me, and I'm going to go to heaven. I mean, that's some strong stuff. And
yeah, it is.
They really took away from. I keep saying character because I'm used to movies, but, like, as a person, like, her faith never wavered, and she also, I don't think, believed he did all of this. But she did believe the power of God was going to bring people to justice. And when you get to the end of this, if you are religious, it did end up bringing like 20 or 30 people to justice via DNA by him opening these cases back up. So that in itself is very interesting. That's more of maybe a retrospective of the show itself. But it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I just, the neglect by the police departments, as you said before, that was also kind of appalling. It's like, and the fact that they just let this guy, like, and I think about Clemmy, I think, as you said, I think her faith just allowed her to keep going on, and she just wasn't afraid. I said that the other day to you, I think, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's what really is the reason behind that. So, I mean, listen, if Pope John Paul II could have forgiven the guy who literally tried to assassinate him.
Yeah,
I guess you could
exactly.
say, like, you know, you can forgive anyone, but
Well, we've seen other like parents of slain children
yeah.
forgive the killer and even go to the jail and write them and visit them before on TV.
Very true. I just don't know like how I would be in that situation. Hopefully I would never find out. But I think so the whole like idea of the police and the sheriffs here being corrupt really to me started with whatchamacallit. Her name is Joyce Lemons, and she was the mother of this woman Debbie who was killed. Joyce actually died and after they filmed the documentary, so at the end it was dedicated to her. But she and her husband, who had been looking for a the actual killer of their daughter, they bring in Henry Lee Lucas and they say, okay, this is the guy. And the mother quickly says, like, it's not possible. Like, his story doesn't add up at all. He's saying that he's getting through, like, this one door, and we know for a fact there was this, like, huge piece of furniture there that would have been, like, really loud and everything. It's just not possible. And it seemed like the Rangers really didn't care that the parents, were poking holes in the story. And if anything, I think they were not insulting the family, but saying that, they were like almost ungrateful. So, Chris, do you think that story was the start of when you started being like, there's something really wrong over here with the sheriffs?
That has to be the start of it. I mean, it went all the way to 60 minutes. There is a problem here with your investigation and the way that you are handling these crimes and accepting these false stories. Basically, they had a giant fridge, or a standing, from what I gathered from the show, there would have been a huge freezer, right? Like one of your box freezers.
Yeah.
In front of this door, and they're like, the amount of effort it would take to move that, and then not come, because they're saying he went out a different way than the way he came in.
And the door would have banged into it, obviously.
There would have just been so much noise that would have alerted, like, whoever was in that house.
Yes, and the crime scene doesn't. The crime scene all happens in the carport as well, so he would also had to have broken, drugged her outside, committed this crime, and moved. And the original details of the story was this is probably someone who knew the victim. Someone
crazy with the police are in.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think the police were crazy. I think
crazy,
that they just
but,
wanted to, they were so desperate to close all these cases. But it's like, if you're the parent or a loved one of who was killed, it's like you don't want just a false blanket over you, you know? You want to know who actually killed, like, your kid.
I have no issue with the police.
I get that, but that's also it's 1970s Texas, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or early 80s Texas. And this guy is pure evil. Based on everything he says, he is Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Right? So, based on everything this guy is telling you, there's no reason why to not believe him. Now, I'm not giving them any credit for believing this guy for murders he didn't commit, but you didn't have DNA testing.
That's true.
You didn't have the forensics you had. And this guy's actively telling you, is like, hey, even if you led them in a conversation, which they wouldn't have known at the time, because once again, the interrogation skills were different even back then. This guy's like actively telling you, like, yeah, I murdered him. This is what I did. You show him a picture of the house or a little map, and he's saying, hey, I did this. And you're looking at this guy knowing that he did kill 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, exactly.
And saying that this man is evil. This is also the time of Charles Manson, the Night Stalker. It's just very easy to believe that maybe this guy is a demon or Satan, because there was still the believability of something encompassing a serial killer during this time period that isn't natural.
It was interesting because at some point in the show, they have a news report where they're like, I forget how they started off saying, they're like, but they're called serial killers.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
like they announced it.
Yeah, so it's like this is such a new concept, whereas
That's
like today we're just not used to it, but we have known so many of
said
like
that there was estimated 35 other ones out there.
Yeah, just roaming out there, which is probably even true to this day. But yeah, so and also I don't want to like say anything negative really, but the documentary made a point at some point to really like showcase like the whole thing of like what Texas Rangers were and kind of like the machismo behind it and all that. So I really think that these guys thought that they were just like really just like good old boys pretty much. And because it was really hard one of them like did not want to say anything negative about the sheriff in question. And it's like, that doesn't do any good at all. But let's talk about, because I felt like this guy was a really interesting, and the
whole thing is perplexing.
It's so perplexing, but I know it like Chris needs when he says like characters, because I want to keep calling them characters, even though it's like...
they have characterized them by putting
but it's like, a real life documentary. But Vic Bissell, wow, I'm butchering that, who was a former district attorney, and he was like, described as this really like popular guy and really personable, and he kind of even admitted that he wanted to go and get his picture taken with Henry Lee Lucas, close a few of their own town's cases, but then he decidedly was like, hey, things aren't right here. So Chris, I want you to walk me through like what your thoughts of the whole Vic situation, because I really felt like this was the start of everyone kind of like raising their eyebrows and scratching their heads going, something isn't adding up.
So after the 60-minute thing, it's when it comes to his small town, so to speak. Not to quote Michael Myers or Halloween, but or Loomis or Halloween, I should say. Happy Samhain, by the way, guys.
Same to you.
So what it gets really crazy, because the more he digs and they start trying to pull into public records start disappearing.
Yeah, that too.
It was really freaky.
Things were sealed. No access was denied.
Yeah, it said access denied during a time where you're like, wait, like, I don't know. I feel like that would be very much like believable today, but with the technology back then, it's like, wait, that was a thing back then, but for them to be searching the databases and for it to automatically be like access denied, I'm like, that's some tinfoil hat shit there.
They're covering stuff up.
And I mean, to be fair, if you read a lot of comics or you watch a lot of movies or crime movies in general, if one prosecutor goes down for being shady, it opens up all of their cases again.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because you had one shady, if you have one shady case, it's going to open it all up. So if you're like a Law and Order fan, if you convict one person wrongly, it's going to open up the and that's happened. That's happened in American history, specifically with the CIA and DNA evidence, where the guy came out and said, "Hey, look, they're not really contaminated, or they're contaminating evidence."
And then there's that. What's that? There's like an organization that does DNA testing for inmates that claim to be innocent too. They're like well known. I forget what they're called.
I don't know what they're called.
Because they were convicted at times of crimes when they didn't have DNA testing, and it turns out a lot of them were not the suspects.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one that's close to home is the Atlanta child murderer, right, or the Atlanta stalker, as they call him, who killed, I want to say either 28 or 33. Those are the numbers that stick in my head, of children and sometimes teenagers. Is what they producing that documentary is, well, yeah, but this guy came out from the CIA and said all their evidence was contaminated because of the air ventilation systems. They weren't testing the cells very positive. And you go back and look at some of the carpet fibers, and they're landing all over the place.
Yeah,
it's
just walk around.
Is this the guy that they covered in the second season of Mindhunter?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
I didn't remember his name, but I was like the whole fact with all the children, and I knew that there was like a lot of eyebrows raised as to if they had captured the right guy or not. So sorry, I was just like, wait, this sounds familiar.
Yeah. So no, the eyebrows raised are more about the treatment of DNA when it gets to said place, which when it got to the CIA it was not, or the FBI, I should say, not the CIA, but the FBI, it was not treated as well as it should have been. So you have these arguments on who this killer was. But in this story, it doesn't really matter because this guy was not anywhere near some of these places.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it was almost like laughable when they were trying to like pin people. And I believe the journalist Hugh had even took it upon himself to do a lot of backdating, and they're like, hey, you can really see where Henry Lee Lucas was at all, like pretty much when they had described Henry Lee as a drifter. He was like, he wasn't really. There's a lot of like physical evidence as to where he was on same exact days, same exact times as to when they're trying to pin murders on him. So it was really like interesting. But I found like, so the whole documentary obviously was about Henry Lee Lucas, but I feel like the documentary took a pause for a second to talk about Vic and what happened to him. And I felt really bad for him because he started asking questions, started snooping around, and then suddenly, you know, his dog is killed.
Yeah,
he's being like followed, and then suddenly all these like lies are coming out about, say, like bribery, and he's facing about 80, and he's facing like 80 years in prison. So I thought that was like really insane. What did you think about that, Chris?
Well, like I was saying earlier, if you prove one murder wrong, you prove them all wrong, right? And it makes every police department, and this wasn't just Texas, this was all across the board. This guy said he was traveling state to state in murdering people at will. It proves a lot of police departments wrong, and the government didn't want to put the public in panic, so it's really easy to pin it on one guy. He just happened to be the poor bastard to be like,
yeah, I did.
Yeah, he's like, he did. There's no way he murdered all these people. Like, I'm sure he murdered some people, which is fucked up, but he didn't kill all these people.
For him to be like he was like, I've killed like 360 at some point. They were like,
it's
you
like
know,
you would have had to kill like 6 people a day.
And then
like,
at some point he was like, oh, I killed 600 people. I mean, like, that's just like, to me, that should have been a red flag in on itself, because as you said, Paulie, it's like, dude, that's just not like physically possible.
No,
I feel like.
I mean, you think about just the time to commit one murder, like, and you're talking about 600. Like,
yeah, it's just like in on itself seems so.
And you just happen to get away with all of them.
But like, why do you think, Paulie, like he originally confessed to all these? Like, really, was it the police pointing out, or do you think
I
that
think both. I think the police wanted to catch the big fish or the alleged big fish, and I think that the only logical conclusion I could think of that why he did that, Henry Lee, why he would confess, was that he figured, hey, I did kill someone, so I'm going to jail anyway for the rest of my life. I might as well just take it all the way, right?
I feel a bit of it was like, because the reporter at one point says that this is the most attention that anyone has ever shown this guy in his life. And it's like,
he liked it.
God, it's like, but it's like, dude, that's just...
He looked like he liked it.
He looked like it, yeah, but I don't know. Like, yeah, I mean, he was given, like, soda. He was given, like, milkshakes. He had all the cigarettes that he could smoke.
He was never in handcuffs.
I think, like, he really just liked that attention. And then when he saw, like, hey, they're really going to, like, put me in jail for the rest of my life and, like, stick a needle in my arm, like, I should probably... But this guy continuously, like, was his own worst enemy, because it happens, like, later on in the documentary when I think Henry Lee finally says that he's not going to cooperate anymore with the sheriffs, because now he's, like, really sticking to the whole, you know, I didn't do this, and Vic actually decides to represent him, and I believe that goes terribly wrong as well.
Yeah,
and it's like, this guy was his own worst enemy, and he ends up, like, spending his whole entire life in prison. I think they said something like George W. Bush, when he was a governor, it was like, something like it was like the only time that he's, like, a governor has, like, reversed a death penalty sentence or something like that. I could be wrong. Am I wrong there?
No. He was the only inmate he's ever reversed a death penalty on. So he gave him basically immunity from the death penalty because he didn't think the trial was fair. But they did not reopen all of the case log that he had admitted to. So in all of these other cities, basically because they knew he was getting the death penalty, they gave him no penalty. So, like, the judges in Philadelphia or Montana or any other state, they were like, this guy's already getting the chair. He admits to it. We'll close the case. And that's part of the problem, is this guy had nothing to do with the majority of these.
Not only did he have nothing to do with them, but then you find out, like, years later when they finally do have DNA evidence. I mean, I believe they even showed that for one of the families of a victim, they did tie it to someone. They're like, shit, like, this person has been roaming around for, like, 35 years free and killed, you know, a loved one of ours. So it was really freaking crazy. It really was. I think that what I finally want to say about, like, Henry Lee Lucas is that he did die, but not from a death penalty, from, I believe, heart-related issues, which, if you watch the documentary, he smoked nonstop, and you could see with his teeth that was a case for him. But yeah, this was a crazy, honestly, documentary. I didn't know where it was, like, turning most of the time. Like, the one episode where it ended with, quote unquote, the real Betty coming, you know, and saying that she's still alive. I was just like, what is going on?
It kept getting, like, more...
It kept getting more twisted, and the thing is that I don't think we're going to know a lot of answers still to this day.
We'll never know.
Because so many are dead. Henry Lee is dead. The main sheriff is dead. So it's like, there's a lot we're not going to know, but I thought it was interesting, and I believe it was the final episode, but they were talking about how, like, investigations are done now. DNA testing is done now, and it's totally a different ballgame.
I doubt he would have gotten away with even one at this point.
I always say that to you, Paulie, but I don't want to, like, jinx anything, which sounds really morbid. But I always say, I always say, I'm like, I think it would be really hard to get away with murder today. Like,
it would have to be. Well, they did say, like, the difficulty with serial killers is that there's no connection really between the victim and the suspect, so it's hard to place who the suspect is, because most killings, it's usually someone that you know.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I always say that, but again, I don't want to, like, jinx anything.
But still, with DNA forensics.
What are you going to say, Chris?
I will say the thing about serial killers now is they're spree killers.
Yeah, basically.
So you get an opposite of what you used to have years ago. Instead of having a guy that wants to get it all over a elongated frame of time, you get it all in one shot, which is scary in itself.
They know they're going to get caught, so they have to do quicker.
I also think it's the difference of, like, you think about in, like, the 60s and 70s when, like, serial killing, you know, like how Henry Lee Lucas was claiming, how Ted Bundy was, Jeffrey Dahmer. It was all about being secretive. It was about causing this, like, fear of, like, the unknown because you didn't know who it was, all this mystery. And now it's like everything is so, like, on your phones, on the TV, and it's like a spree killer. You know, that's the infamy that they're looking for. You know,
That
they
was
know that
my-
everyone's going to have their phones out.
That was my, sorry to interrupt,
It's
but
okay.
that was actually my only other logical conclusion that I came to as to why he would admit to all these murders, because I've heard it before. I forgot what I watched last week, but this kid had gotten caught. He killed his parents and he planned on going on a spree killing, and it didn't work out. And when asked why, he said he just wanted to outdo the worst serial killer in history. So I thought to myself, maybe he just wanted to do that as well, because I've heard that time and time again.
Well, I told you that there was like that one killer that I saw a news report on where like he was just standing there in cuffs, and a news reporter was like, "Oh, did you kill that guy?" And he's like, "Oh, with my bare hands." And they were like, "No, he like shot the person or something."
Yeah, they
Like,
just want to outdo.
people just want to outdo themselves.
So it could have been that. I mean, maybe again he knew he was going away anyway. So
But the whole thing with Harry Lucas like confused me so much, because at some point then he's crying. And it's like they asked him, he's like, "Are you crying because, you know,
I'd be
you're not getting the
crying
death
if I was him,
sentence
too.
now, but are you crying for the victims?" Like, I didn't know whether to believe, like, this guy was legitimately sincere or anything. It really confused me. But
he also had brain damage that was proven. So I mean,
but
who
does
knows?
that, you know, does that
I
take,
mean,
like, for what he did?
No,
He still
not-
killed people.
so my main takeaway from this is everything with Henry Lucas is that he became friends with the people in the jail that he stayed in, which was a very small jailhouse, and he got preferential treatment. And there's no reason for him to stop spinning these webs. If he knows he's going to go to jail, like prison, the rest of his life, why would he stop spinning these webs as long as they're giving him steak dinners and milkshakes?
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is, I mean, if you know that you're going to go spend your life in prison, or you can have a TV in your jail cell and drink milkshakes and hang out and eat steak with the prison guards, why would you not do that? And that's what he did. The problem is the system, not Henry Lee Lucas. He's going to give them as much as he can give them. And it's not like the other killers are going to stand out unless there happens to be another serial killer that gets mad and been like, "No, I killed all 20 of them."
Right.
Right? Unless someone gets really mad, because otherwise he's taking your kill away from you. He's cleaning the slate for you the rest of your life.
And
You don't
the
have to
cra-
worry about that.
Those people could still be very much alive today. I mean, this was just the 80s. So, I mean, like, the people who actually did kill all those other people are probably still all out there if they didn't get caught for other crimes, maybe.
Well, that's the freaky thing about it. It's like, just as Chris said, like, you just gave him a clean slate. This one person is
Yeah.
like, shit, like, am I going to get caught? It's like, oh, no, this guy here, you know, took everything
Yeah,
from
you'd
me.
have to be crazy to be like, oh, yeah, no, I did that.
Yeah, no, it was insane. It really was. Chris, what did you think about the, like, style of the documentary series? Like, does it, say, stand up to Making a Murderer or any other, say, like, crime documentary? Because that's the thing, is that, like, it has to be a good crime documentary to really, like, engage you. And I felt that this documentary really kept a lot, like, close to the vest. It didn't give away too much. It really let the story unfold. I mean, honestly, like, I could have kept watching it. It was 5 episodes, and I could have kept, like, wanting to know more about this.
I think that's one of the great things about this particular crime documentary is there is no hero in the story. Like, you have a criminal who's already been to prison for killing someone, who has admittedly killed 2 people that you can obviously prove. And it's more about his lies in the aftermath and the justice system, which makes it so intriguing. Because if this happens to this guy, what happens to maybe someone that has 4 grams of weed? How does that get trumped up or whatever? I mean, I think that's more of the interesting part, is how is the government going to handle the person getting arrested and what their scenario is. And the fact that they prove that, like, they've disproved 20 murders from this guy. by DNA evidence, and the fact that they're able to cancel out so many cold cases if you just investigate them by DNA and get these families the resolution they're looking for. It's incredible. And if you look at Patton Oswalt's wife, and I'm sorry I'm spacing on her name, in the Golden State Killer scenario where they used like Ancestry.com and they went through and found DNA to link, like it could only be 16 people in this entire state. Now we just have to link them through this different kind of evidence. Like that stuff is incredible to me. It's amazing how far we've came. And it's very doubtful we'll ever see a serial killer in the way that we saw in the 70s and the 80s just because of that.
I doubt it.
But no one should want that in general, but I think that's where we're at in life. And the documentary, the fascinating part about the documentary is the fact the government wants to cover up for their own fuck ups, as opposed to saying these people walk free. And here's the thing, is the people they arrested, right, or the people they did catch for these murders, they would have to let walk if he was like, no, this conspiracy is bullshit. I didn't do anything. So all of those go back on the books, and it's public defense, man. It's really, really hard for these cats to go back and solve these murders from 10, 15 years ago. It's very difficult. But at the same time, I think they've proven without a doubt that this guy at best maybe killed 6 or 7 people.
Yeah, he definitely killed somebody. So regardless, he's still a pretty evil person.
Well, he killed his mom. He definitely killed Kate. He killed a few people, but he definitely didn't kill the 360 people that he was claiming that he killed. But yeah, I mean, it is insane.
It does
To
leave
me,
a problem too. Like Chris said, with the police department, that's a huge issue to think of. Like, and to think how deep it goes as well. Like, if they're willing to just be okay with that.
well, as I said, I think it goes into kind of that machismo thing and that maybe hero complex. As we saw, the main sheriff was very, a local hero from what he did during the sniper shooting. And he probably wanted to relive that. And this was his golden ticket, essentially, to do that. But yeah, I think that The Confession Killer was definitely a great documentary. Paulie, did you want to comment on the style of documentary and all that?
Well, I prefer documentaries that are not biased in any. I just like to see what it is for what it is. But I feel like, as you said, I feel like they just let it unfold, and you were just shocked at every corner.
I certainly was.
And there was no way of guessing that stuff. At every time a new scene would come on, I was shocked. So I like this style of documentary a lot. I thought it was really cool how it kept you on the edge of your seat, and it just kept you guessing constantly.
I know. I was a little there was one night where we started it and you fell asleep 2 episodes in, and I was like, oh my God, Paulie, please wake up so that we can continue watching this. And I kept watching it, and I think at some point I got even scared at some point, and I was like, oh my God, I think I turned it off after the 4th episode. I was like, oh shit, it's late right now. I'm fucking terrified.
I mean, as a documentary, if you're trying to compare it to some of the other Netflix, even the Unsolved Murders or Making a Murderer, that's one murder, right? Most of the time in those. And this is a guy that confessed to 1,200 murders at one time.
Yeah.
And
that's just not possible, dude.
And I feel like they do a good job of towing the line both ways. They're he didn't commit these, but he also did commit these. There's no way he would have known this. They were 100% right on the first couple, but like the rest of it's crazy.
They even brought him a fake case.
That was
he admitted
insane.
to, and the whole case wasn't even real.
That was great, though. That was so great. It was this one cop from Dallas who wasn't, she didn't think that he was telling the truth, and she goes back to her supervisors, and they're like, let's just make this entirely, like, fake, made-up case, get some generic photos, do this, put it in front of him. And he's like, oh, yeah, I killed this girl this way, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh my God. Yeah, so it was great in like showing
the way he drew their pictures.
It was just so good, like the way it
like
set up and everything. So I really liked it. I'm glad that you brought this to me, Chris.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have watched it because I just don't think I would have known about it. So I was like, as soon as you're like, oh, Confession Killer, I was like, all right, let me check this out.
I have never heard of him.
And I never heard of him, which again, like I was so shocked because I was like, I feel like, because that whole, like, as morbid as it is, but as I said, I think we have, like, as humans, this general morbid curiosity. It's like, about the big ones, the Manson, Charles Manson,
the last one,
the Charles Manson, the Jeffrey Dahmer, the Ted Bundys. It's
Dahmer.
like the Son of Sam's. It's like about them, the Richard Ramirez's, but then it's like
we have to stop throwing Charles Manson into the serial killer thing.
I know he's not. You can't say that but
he didn't actually kill anybody.
Yeah,
right?
I know. It's one of those things that it's like.
That's true. Actually, I didn't even go to think about it that deep.
If we want to throw Tex Wilson into it, if you just want to go Tex, then sure.
The Manson family. Is it fair to say the Manson family?
The Manson family is fair to say because Tex Wilson killed more than 2 people, I guess.
Probably Tex Wilson probably killed more than Henry Lee Lucas, like at the, honestly.
Yes. And God, the crazy line from Tex, I am the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work. Probably the most scary.
No, you should watch have you ever watched the documentary on Richard Ramirez?
Oh wow, yeah, that guy was nuts.
So I highly recommend to everyone out there to watch that Golden State Killer documentary that's on HBO. It is phenomenal. It's a lot about the writer, but it's just really, really, really well done, the chase of this killer and the fact they actually caught this guy who was a former police officer.
Well, I was going to say that if you ever had the chance, like, Chris, to watch something of Richard Ramirez, because that guy was fucking sick as well. Like, if what Tex said gave you chills, like anything that this guy Richard said gave me chills while freaking watching it.
He did, but he also took credit for a lot of the Golden State Killer's kills. So you have the original Night Stalker and you have the Night Stalker.
Yeah, then you have the fake.
Yeah, I guess all these guys are like egotistical,
And the original Night Stalker would call you on the phone and say things like, "I'm gonna kill you" before you died, which is like.
This is why we don't have landlines anymore.
Behind your curtains.
This is why we don't have landlines anymore. You always see those horror movies. They're all with landlines. It's like, I got rid of that shit.
It's why all of us have burner phones.
Exactly.
I don't worry about serial killers though anymore. It's more
don't
like you
jinx
said. It's spree killers now. It's serial killers. I think are a thing of the past. You'd have
you
to
say that, and there's probably like
you would have to be like
50
special
right
ops, like a previous special operative or something.
You say that, and there's probably like 50 in the country right now. If you're listening, don't come after us. But Chris, did you have else that you wanted to say about the Confession Killer before we wrap everything up?
It's baffling. It'll make you question your government. I think that you should watch it. I think it's one of the better documentaries that are on Netflix. It's not one-sided at all.
That's why.
If you didn't like Making a Murderer, they did a really good job of giving you both sides, even to the point where they gave you these families that are hard-pressed on, like, no, this guy, we thought for the longest time, killed someone in our family. It's great. They do a really, really good job. I like it way better than Making a Murderer, which I think debatably is very lifted to one side of the story they're telling. The same thing as with Joe Exotic or the Tiger King or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes Netflix likes to lift a documentary to one side. This one is very open-ended. You can make your own decision on how many people this guy killed, which I think is more than he got convicted for.
That's because probably the producers couldn't even figure out.
No, I mean, Chris, like, they definitely, you had to do the work.
Like,
you
how
had to
could
do
you-
the thinking,
Yeah.
like with Making a Murderer, it's kind of leaning a lot towards one way, and with, say, Tiger King, I mean, it's all really there. But even though I'm not going to get into the Tiger King thing, because we pretty much just gave Joe Exotic all of the attention that he actually wanted. Like, so we did exactly the opposite of what we should have.
Yes. So what I would say, as far as spree killing goes, that is the new serial killer that they should be most worried about. And I would recommend everyone read the book by Dave Cullen, Columbine.
What is it called?
Columbine?
About the Columbine shooting?
It's about the Columbine shootings, but it's about the fact that the American media made Columbine what it was. It made it way more than it had ever been before. There's been bigger spree shootings even before Columbine. It talks about the actual ideal of what Columbine would have been, which is if the bombs would have exploded that they set in the lunchroom, it would have been way worse. We're talking like hundreds as opposed to, I think it was 12 or 13. And I apologize if I get the number wrong. But definitely a crazy book to read if you're in true crime. This is a crazy story just because this guy confessed to so many murders, and it's very sad for the families. And I'm glad that DNA evidence has wrapped up at least 20 of the crimes he originally confessed to, and hopefully we get more.
It just sucks because as time goes on, it's just going to be harder and harder, and I think that there's always going to be some left.
There's going to be some,
unsolved.
like, unsolved, but hopefully, these cold cases will be closed. But, yeah, I thought it was a great documentary to watch if you're into true crime stuff. It's on Netflix. It's 5 episodes. I think each episode contains a lot in it. It leaves a lot to wonder and certainly sheds light on a story that you may not have known about, because I certainly didn't. But
And it's captivating.
it's very captivating. But Chris, thank you for being here with me on this GVN review. Please let everyone know where they can find you, what you got coming up on the horizon, and all that good stuff.
Well, we have, if you want to talk to me on Twitter about this or about anything, you get me at Chris R. Patton on Twitter. And we have Wrestling Geeks Alliance that comes out twice a week, sometimes once a week, but it's a 4-hour show, so there's lots to dig into. And Skates to Throats and the horror podcast that Tia and I have done recently. There's lots of good things out there at geekvibesnation.com. Make sure you check that out. And yeah, hopefully we'll have another one of these. We run into something good. I have one more for you, which is about the chessboard killer in Russia, and I think you'll really dig it.
Well, definitely message me that so I can check it out. But I wanted to definitely be a part of the last horror film podcast that you did. It's just Joanne and I had just done a Mandalorian podcast, and I had some work I need to do. And he was like, "Do you want to hop on?" I was like, "Oh God, I want to, but I know I got to get work done." So, but that was a lot of fun, even though I'm not the biggest horror movie fan. It still was really great with you guys, Dan, AJ, Dom. It's always a lot of fun. But geez, you and Dane go 4 hours. That's great. Again, people like to complain about too long of podcast. No, What did they complain about? Yeah, they
Well,
complain
then
about
just
like
stop listening.
yeah, they complain about like too long of podcasts, and I'm like, well, if the Twitch streamers can stream for like 8 hours straight and they'll watch them, you can listen to my 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
it's a lot of work. I mean, you can bookmark it. If you have a Spotify, just stop it. It'll play back in the same
Yeah.
spot. I mean, we got to go over like 3 or 4 2 to 3 hour shows. It takes a while to
No,
go
and not for
over all the
nothing, like-
content.
Not for
and you have
nothing, like
a lot of content.
well, not for nothing. Like Dane himself is like really entertaining, so you could listen to him a shit ton, and you two have a really great dynamic with each other. So I'm just saying, like, listen, I love long podcasts. I put them on in the background. I do my work. Like people who complain, you can just not listen, I guess. But Paulie, what do you have going on and everything? What should people look out for you?
Right now I just started a new YouTube channel, but it's a baby, so I'm not gonna shout it out yet. And I'm not really into social media. I produce
You
music.
don't want to shout out your YouTube channel?
Not right now. But I do produce music as well, so I don't think I mentioned this to anybody but Tia, but I had a song released in Germany through a record company called Plutonium Records a few months back. So other than music and YouTube and chilling with COVID, nothing really.
Yes, please, everyone stay home, wear your mask so that we can finally go to the movie theaters at some point, because I need some freaking content to talk about. But Paulie, Chris, thank you so much for being here with me tonight to talk about The Confession Killer on Netflix. Please make sure you check it out. Make sure you definitely check us out at geekvibesnation.com. It has links to all of our social media. Our YouTube page is Geek Vibes Podcast, but besides that, you can go on all of the podcast networks and find us out, Geek Vibes Nation. And I will talk to all of you guys later. See ya.
See ya.